There is a version of you that doesn't flinch, that sits down, locks in, and does exactly what needs to be done. You've met this person. The question is, why do they only show up sometimes? Think about the last time your mind completely betrayed you. Not in a crisis, not under pressure. On an ordinary Tuesday, you had a clear intention. You sat down, and within minutes, without deciding to, without even noticing the moment it happened, you were somewhere else entirely. A different tab, a different thought, a different version of the next hour than the one you planned. And the worst part isn't the lost time. The worst part is that it felt involuntary, like your mind made the decision before you did. That feeling has a name, and it has a remedy. Miyamoto Musashi, the greatest swordsman Japan ever produced, spent his entire life studying one question above all others. Not how do I defeat my opponent? How do I command myself? He understood something that most people never confront directly. An unmastered mind doesn't belong to you. It belongs to whatever is loudest in the room. The notification, the worry, the comfort that costs nothing now and everything later. Today you are going to learn 7 principles drawn from Musashi and from the oldest philosophical traditions in Japan for taking back command of the one instrument that determines everything else in your life, your mind. Subscribe if this is a conversation you want to keep having, and drop a comment below. When does your mind disobey you most? Chapter 1. Mushin, empty mind. Before Musashi ever drew a sword in a duel, he did something his opponents almost never did. He emptied. Mushin, no mind. Not the absence of thought, the absence of interference. A mind so cleared of noise, agenda, and attachment to outcome that it could respond to what was actually happening rather than what it feared, expected, or hoped for. Most people walk into the hardest moments of their day carrying everything. The argument from this morning, the email they haven't answered, the version of this task that went wrong last time. They wonder why they can't focus. They're not trying to focus, they're trying to focus while managing a crowd. Research consistently shows that unresolved mental tasks actively consume cognitive resources even when you are not consciously thinking about them. Your awareness is being billed for things that aren't in the room. Musashi practiced Mushin not as meditation, as a deliberate act of clearing before engagement. Write the noise down. Set it outside the door. Walk in with nothing. The mind that commands is the mind that arrives empty. Everything else is fighting with luggage. Chapter 2. Zanshin. Remaining awareness. Here is something nobody tells you about distraction. The moment you lose focus is almost never the moment you think it is. It happened earlier, in the transition, in the 30 seconds between finishing one thing and beginning the next, when your guard came down and your hand found the phone before your intention caught up. Zanshin. Remaining awareness. The mind that doesn't power down between actions. In Japanese archery, zanshin is the posture held after the arrow has already left the bow. The shot is done. The archer hasn't moved. Breath still controlled. Gaze still present. Because the discipline isn't in the moment of action, it's in what you do when the pressure releases. That is exactly when most people lose the thread. Task complete. Guard drops. 20 minutes disappear. Research consistently shows that the quality of our transitions between focused work, how deliberately we close one effort and open the next, predicts sustained performance far more than raw willpower. The leak isn't in the work, it's in the gaps. Zanshin asks you to stay present all the way through the end of something, to close the task with the same intention you opened it with. To treat the transition as part of the discipline, not a break from it. The sword is back in the sheath, the warrior is still present. That is Zanshin. Chapter 3. Fudoshin, the immovable mind. Musashi once arrived to a duel hours late. His opponent, a skilled and respected swordsman named Sasaki Kojiro, had been waiting on a remote island in the heat, surrounded by his supporters, composure eroding with every passing hour. By the time Musashi stepped off the boat, Kojiro was already somewhere else mentally, moved, destabilized. The duel lasted seconds. Fudoshin, the immovable mind. Not the mind that feels nothing. The mind that cannot be relocated from its center by provocation, fear, urgency, or the friction of ordinary life. You know this enemy. It's not always another person. Sometimes it's an email that arrives at the wrong moment, a comment that lodges in your chest, an unexpected problem that takes up residence in the background of everything you try to do for the rest of the day. Research consistently shows that emotional reactivity, the degree to which external events displace your internal state, is one of the strongest predictors of attention collapse. You don't lose focus because you lack willpower. You lose focus because something moved you, and you followed it. Fudoshin is trained, not granted. The Zen monk Takuan Soho, who counted samurai among his students, wrote that the immovable mind is not one that refuses to feel, it is one that feels fully and returns. The wave comes, the depths don't change, that is what you are building, not the absence of disturbance, the habit of returning. Chapter 4. The Interval. There is a space between the impulse and the action. Most people have never lived there. Interval, negative space. The pause that Japanese aesthetics treat not as emptiness but as the most active part of any experience. In traditional Japanese music, is the silence between the notes. Remove it and you don't have faster music. You have noise. In combat, Musashi used deliberately, creating space where his opponents expected contact, letting them commit, letting their momentum carry them into positions they could not recover from. The pause wasn't passivity. It was the sharpest part of his strategy. Your distraction follows a sequence. Trigger, impulse, action. Most people experience that sequence as a single event. The phone is in their hand before they knew they reached for it. Ma says, there is space in that sequence. You can learn to live in it. Research consistently shows that introducing even a minimal pause between a distraction trigger and the response to it dramatically increases the likelihood of choosing the focused path. The gap doesn't need to be long, it needs to exist. One breath, that is all Ma asks for at first. One breath between the pull and the surrender. In that breath, you are the one deciding. That is the whole shift. Chapter 5. Shokunin, the spirit of mastery. There is a word in Japanese that has no clean translation. Shokunin. It is often rendered as craftsman or artisan, but those words don't carry what shokunin actually means. A shokunin is not simply someone who is good at their work. It is someone whose work and self have become the same thing. Jiro Ono, the sushi master who spent over 70 years perfecting a single craft, has said that he thinks about sushi constantly, not because he forces himself to, because the boundary between Jiro and his work dissolved so long ago he couldn't find it now if he tried. That is shokunin. Musashi described this state in the Book of Five Rings as the ultimate aim of any serious practice. The point at which the discipline stops feeling like something you do and starts feeling like something you are. Research consistently shows that the people who sustain focused effort over the longest periods are not more motivated than others. They are more identified. The work is not separate from the self, which means distraction is not just an inconvenience, it is a departure from who they are. You don't have to be Jiro to use this, you just have to ask a different question. Not how do I make myself focus, but who am I when I am at my most capable, and what does that person do in this moment? The mind follows identity, give it one worth following. Chapter 6. Kaizen. 1 degree of change. Musashi did not become Musashi in a single duel. He fought his first serious opponent at 13. He was still refining his philosophy at 60, alone in a cave writing the final pages of a life's work. 50 years of 1 degree adjustments. 50 years of asking, what is the one thing I can do better today than yesterday? Kaizen. Continuous improvement. Not the transformation, the next step. The reason most attempts at discipline collapse is not lack of desire. It's the size of the ask. You decide to overhaul everything at once. The system strains, the motivation burns fast, and inside 2 weeks you are back where you started, plus the weight of having tried and stopped again. Kaizen doesn't ask for the overhaul. It asks for the smallest honest improvement. 5 more minutes of focus than yesterday. 1 moment of choosing the harder thing when the easier thing was right there. Research consistently shows that incremental improvement compounds in ways that are genuinely difficult to predict from the starting point. The gains look small until suddenly they don't. Toyota built one of the most efficient manufacturing systems in history, not through revolution but through a standing question asked on every floor, every day. What is one thing we can improve right now? Ask yourself that question about your focus. Just one thing, just today, that is enough. Chapter 7. Ikigai. The reason the mind obeys. Here is the truth underneath all 6 of the principles you have just heard. A mind with no reason to focus will always find a reason not to. Ikigai. Your reason for being. The thing that makes the effort feel like direction rather than discipline. Musashi didn't spend 50 years mastering the sword because he was disciplined. He spent 50 years mastering the sword because the sword was the organizer's principle of his entire existence. Everything else, comfort, security, the approval of others, was secondary to the way. That kind of clarity doesn't require willpower, it generates it. Ikigai is where 4 things converge. What you love, what you are good at, what the world has a use for, and what can sustain your life. Most people are waiting for all four to align perfectly before they commit. That alignment never comes first, it comes through the commitment. Research consistently shows that a clear sense of purpose is one of the most powerful predictors of sustained attention and resistance to distraction. Not because purposeful people feel less pull toward easier things, but because they have something the pull has to compete with. When the mind knows why it is doing something, the fight with distraction changes character entirely. It stops being a battle of willpower. It becomes a question of loyalty. Are you loyal to the thing that matters, or to the thing that is simply closer? That is the question Ikigai asks. 7 principles. Not a system. Not a routine you follow for 30 days and then abandon. A vocabulary for understanding what is actually happening when your mind does what it does, and the tools to respond to it differently. Mushin, arrive empty. Zanshin, stay present through the end. Fudoshin, return to center when something moves you. Ma, live in the pause. Shokunin, let your work and yourself become the same. Kaizen, improve by 1 honest degree today. Ikigai, give your mind a reason that the noise has to compete with. Musashi wrote, in the closing pages of the Book of 5 Rings, that the ultimate aim of any discipline is to reach the place where you no longer think about it, where the right action happens because of who you have become, not because you managed to force yourself. That place exists. You've touched it before, in the moments when everything clicked, when the work moved cleanly, when time disappeared in the best possible way. These 7 principles are the path back to that place. Not once. Reliably. Tell me in the comments which of these 7 do you need most right now. Name it. Subscribe if this is the kind of thinking you want more of. Thank you for watching. See you next time. And as always, remember to stay in tune with your own mind frequency.